And why that level of confidence is coming? Because affordable green energy is available on demand. And when rest of the world is imposing regulation about concerns on environment or carbon border adjustment mechanism, Indian manufacturers and Indian industry is geared up for that challenge because we can go completely green. As my friend Praveen was saying, we are not only dependent on solar. With the solar, wind, and water batteries, and if you start scheduling the power, you can actually, every 5 minutes interval, you can send the green electrons to the grid, and it becomes a dispatchable power. So today what opportunity we have is that we have the talent pool, which is probably one of the best in the world. We have youth which is interested in taking on any challenge head on, and we have entrepreneurs who are willing to walk the talk. So what we are seeing is that in terms of the scale, when India used to talk about I was the first player to set up a large grid connected project. So earlier goal was 20 gigawatt and people thought that's ambitious over 10 years. And Mr. Modi comes and then revises it to 100 gigawatt. People think it's ambitious. And when it's achieved, now it's 500 gigawatt. But actually there is a very clear trajectory. Government of India first time has announced these are the 4 buying agency. They will be buying 50 gigawatt over next 12 months, next 12 months, next 12 months. So as an investor and a developer, I have a clear roadmap. I have a transmission company which is ready to provide me the grid connectivity in 3 months, which except in China, rest of the world takes 3 years, and in some country like US, it takes 5 to 7 years. And then we have state governments who is willing to help you acquire the lands which is non-usable. And then we have banks which is willing to fund. So I think my study shows that even today, 85% of the infrastructure, irrespective whether it is green, brown, gray, everything is done by Indian capital. And imagine today our economy is 3.5 trillion. And by 2030, we are 8 trillion. Our current saving rate is closer to 30%. So currently we are getting $1 trillion saving and our banks are willing to fund. Once we have $2.4 billion saving rate, what kind of infrastructure you will be developing? So I think from my perspective as an investor, as an entrepreneur, we are in the right country, in the right industry, at the right time. Because across the value chain of green energy, there is an opportunity. First time as a buyer, I am facing a challenge. My transformer supplier tells me, sir, I can give you 220 kV transformer after 12 months. Someone will say 18 months. So we are seeing and we are pleased about it, though we don't like it. So the opportunity across the value chain is humongous.
Okay, fantastic. I think that paints a really good picture of what's happening on ground. Deepak, let me bring you in as well and get your perspective on how things are shaping up. Any particular challenges that the industry still faces, when it comes to partners in the ecosystem, collaborations, government, private sector, how to really bring it all together?
Well, so thank you for having me and thank you. Well, I think I would call it a time of opportunities. It's probably never seen and not seen in other parts of the world what's happening in the country today. And I think each one of us in this room has a role to play. Because what we're talking is a land of opportunities, but we're also trying to discuss how do we do it right way, because others didn't do it. Now, we know the world is suffering and we know the decarbonization has become a big topic, and we did not contribute to the extent of the problem, but we somehow have to solve it, because at the end, the generation who's going to come will suffer. I mean, I have 2 kids, one quite young. I tell it very openly, it becomes difficult to sometimes breathe in this particular city itself. So even if we were not responsible for creating a problem, we have to solve the problem. And the promises which this government, the corporates, and the public is working on, I think it only promises that we can do it right. So all the government initiatives are bringing it, while we all know the numbers. India wants to add the energy capacity by 2. But we don't want to do it what the Western did. We want to do it in a non-fossil way. So the electric part, the electricity, be it coming from sun, be it wind, by water, by biofuels, be it by nuclear, all that helps us to create a clean energy. And electricity for these resources, I mean, we all know, is the most cleanest vector of energy. So again, opportunities are huge. I see a very clear direction given by the Honorable Prime Minister and the government itself. The corporate world, the society is inclined to deploy, use. Now, this is also all about the supply side, right? How do we build the right energy? But each one of us in the room is responsible how we consume it. And that's something sometimes we get underspoken. Because the big piece of energy, or actually the most cleanest form of the energy which we can create is by saving it, right? So if I save at everything I do at my home, at my office, or anyone, is exactly proportional to what I can create, right? Or actually 3x the proportion I create. And I think here technologies are available where we can incorporate, we can use, and I understand the electrical vehicle story, but that's probably not the biggest problem. Again, that's my limited view. The biggest problem we have to solve is where we consume. And the consumer, if you look at 2/3 of the consumption is in the buildings or in the industrial setup. And electrical vehicle will solve a problem or not the problem. And the problem is in the industry segment and the building segment. And I think the contribution of each one of us, which is beyond the corporates, I think an individual citizen and an individual household becomes, and today technologies give those edges to bring that contribution from each one of us to solve the problem of decarbonization. So again, to your question, this is a land of opportunity, not only for corporate and governments, but everyone in this room. And each one can play a role, even if we did not create it, but at the end we want to solve it. So there is a planet where the next generation can live healthy and of course, peacefully in years to come.
Absolutely. We've got the G20 conference coming up, and we know that this is going to be, one of the biggest subjects. As you mentioned, India has found it difficult to contribute its part up till now. We've got the COP agenda, etc. But what are the expectations from the conference this time? It's being helmed by Prime Minister Modi. He's had global eyeballs on him over a series of high-profile visits over the last few months, and the G20 is going to be, I think, the penultimate. What are your expectations from this meet? Are you expecting India perhaps to commit to something, to lay out some kind of roadmap? Is there some kind of dialogue that you're hoping to see or hear from, from this particular mix of leaders when it comes to the climate change agenda? Dr. Sinha.
I think there are three clear areas that one is talking about the energy equity and energy security. And I think supply chain will be a very important factor. How do we develop the supply chain in India and some of the other countries, so that we are not dependent on one single country, whether it is sourcing for solar or wind or batteries. And we have a more diversified supply chain. So that's one area that there has to be a more consensus building. The second is, where do we get the capital? And we are talking about not the commercial capital, but also the patient capital that can come, which can support and that can be leveraged to bring the type of development and the capacity addition that one is talking about. And this is not only again in India, but also in the global south and some of the other developing countries in the world, the sub-Sahara Africa. So I think that's the second. And the third is about the technology. How do we bring some of the new technologies? Today we have been dependent on one type of production of solar panels, the polysilicon route. Do we have alternate technologies? Do we have the peroxides? Do we have the other technologies, some of the nanotechnologies of using organic material? Do we have alternate technologies on manufacturing of batteries in terms of different chemistries? Do we have alternate technologies on nuclear power in terms of the small modular nuclear reactors. So I think there's a lot of technology intervention that needs to come so that the pace of change is much more. We are able to make this power reliable, the renewable power, because it is otherwise by nature intermittent. And how do we bring resilience? How do we have a N-1 power supply? So I think we need to work on the technology, and that's where the collaboration with some of the global players, global institutions, global partners, companies who are in the forefront of technology development needs to be done. So these are the 3 agenda items that I feel for clean energy. Of course, there are issues about how do we get women into the manufacturing or getting into the renewable, and also in the various other initiatives that we have. But I think these 3 will play a very, very critical role going forward.
Go for it.
So I think we've only talked about 20% of the emission. The rest, electricity is only 18% of the carbon footprint. 82% is the rest of the industry, transport, citizens, construction. And the good news is that technology exists in India to decarbonize those sectors. And hard to abate sector like steel, aluminum, copper, cement, you name it, everything can be decarbonized, including mobility. All the in the medium term, all the mid-size and heavy vehicles will move to hydrogen. So I think one of the biggest expectation I have from the G20, the world realizes that it is very important to have a fair and just transition. We can't have global south get at more disadvantageous position because of the rapid transition demand. So I think what we are expecting is that global framework like Paris Agreement, which had Article 6.2, which is legally binding article where global north would create the framework to supply the low cost of capital to global south. And second area is to create the marketplace. Like say Germany has a demand for 2 million ton hydrogen, which is 13 million ton ammonia. If they buy 5 million ton ammonia from India and India transfers the ITMOs, or for that matter, any country in the global south. So that will make global north more responsible and accountable. So the whole expectation is that in India will lead the global south and take on the issues of inequality in wealth, inequality in job creation, energy, affordability, and poverty head on. And there will be mechanism established under World Bank, IMF, Bureau of Settlement. Like say for example, there is a huge hedging cost if you are borrowing in dollars. And if there was a currency swap mechanism or hedging provided by developed nation for the transition, the cost of capital would come down and you will see much more speedier transition happening in India or rest of the global south. So there are several opportunity. B20 task force, we had 7th task force, I co-chaired one of them. And we have given a very specific recommendation that how do we collaborate globally to solve for inclusiveness, inequality, just and fair transition, and making sure that the financing is available at the right cost in right geographies. So these suggestions are not just suggestions, but it's an actionable item, and Global South can benefit from India's leadership at G20.
So one of the big take for me, and I think it will be discussed, was the overall we saw that there is a time to act is now, right? I don't think there is a tomorrow. So that was probably a very consensus, visible discussion around that while there was a period of discussion and awareness, but this is the moment to act. And I think India was probably this phase of G20 and B20 where India portrayed how can we accelerate. And I think the work India did in this year or even less than years, I mean, Vineet was co-chairing a stream of those B20, I think actually 7-8 months, what we have produced, what we have shown to the world, the speed and agility. So I think that's very remarkable. The one thing I carry also, and I think this should be visible, is how do we engage? And I think the big discussion is who pays the bill, right? That's what's at the end, अच्छी बातें कर लेते हैं, but who's going to pay for all this? So I love the discussions around this because I think it's not one person versus the others. It's all about us together in it, be it the corporate, be it the regulators, be it the government, be it the banks, be it the financial. And Mr. Kant was saying, the money is there. वो किसकी जेब से निकालनी है या किसने देनी है is the discussion. I think when this was serious discussion this time. So if you want to save the planet, because at the end there is no planet, what will you do with that resources, right? So I am very optimistic that in the next few days these things should be now become a more reality, and the moment of execution should be on the top of the execution.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Closing comments, Mr. Khan.
Yes. Listen, when it comes to B20, I don't think India needs the B20 to figure out how to decarbonize and what to do. So the value of the B20 under India's leadership, I see sort of 3 points. First, when the rules of the sustainability movement were written, countries like India were not at the table. So this is the time, it's called economic diplomacy. This is what it looks like, people. You go to B20 and you hear the leaders talking about, that's what economic diplomacy is, which is to soften the stance that you are facing as an emerging economy and saying, you know, you set these rules, but they don't apply to us in the same way. They need to be adjusted, and I'm giving you warning here that this adjustment needs to be made if you want us to continue down this path, which is critical for the whole planet. Second, this discussion on sustainability and decarbonization, it used to be about just the environment and a more domestic issue, sometimes even political issue around, you know, who created the mess and who should pay for it and how to compensate. But it is now quickly moving towards the WTO discussions about markets being open. And that's what you will see coming out. This is the first line of defense that's being put forward through this economic diplomacy. And India, I would expect to lead that charge to say, let me step back. When you think about the post-Second World War growth, particularly when you think about the Asian tigers, rise of Japan before that, that happened because of innovation, hard work, good policies, but it also happened because North America and Europe left the markets open for products from those regions. If that is not happening this time around, this equation is not going to work. So I think this discussion is very squarely moving towards trade discussions now. So what kind of requirements is Europe going to put on imports, for example, cars and green steel? How do you define green steel? You know, does everybody have equal access to the technologies that are defining green steel? So I think this is where it's headed. You will see that a number of agenda items that have been set up over, 6-8 months of preparation for the B20, you will see them being picked up at the COP28 meetings in Dubai. You will see them at the World Economic Forum, and you will most certainly see them continued at the G20 and the B20 meetings in Brazil. That's what I would look at in terms of what does India get out of it and what role is it playing globally.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Really, really important, crucial points that you all raised, as well as giving us a very in-depth, insightful picture of the landscape and what we can expect going forward. Look forward to seeing what happens next. Thank you so much.
What a stellar session, Abha. Thank you, gentlemen. We'd like to request you to stay back on stage, and I'd like to invite Managing Editor, Business Today TV, Siddharth Zarabi, to express a token of our gratitude. Can we have a huge round of applause, please? Thank you, gentlemen.